I wanted to get us started talking with our agenda today that we'll have a brief overview of the background of the project in building the geographic information systems. Then we'll talk about place and why it matters specifically in education. Then I'll give you an introduction into how GIS works and some of the main lingo for you as you're learning to navigate the maps. And then I'll spend some time with the demonstration of your Pennsylvania GIS application to show you how it works, as well as walk through one story, one example of education and business opportunity in Pennsylvania that can kind of demonstrate for you how you'll take it back home to explore and use the map. And then, of course, we'll close with some time for questions. So this work comes to you out of the College and Career Readiness and Success Center. This is a federally funded content center designed to support state education agencies and local education agencies in college and career readiness efforts. We provide technical assistance on college and career readiness related topics such as career readiness, work-based learning, employability skills, data use, ESSA implementation, and most recently we've added work in a variety of states on work-based learning around geographic information systems. This is a strategy that's existed for a long time but hasn't necessarily been applied specifically in the CTE space. So working with states around geographic information systems, we go through a process of identifying main data sources and building prototypes and wireframes to present to the team and talk through the actual building of the application. And then we talk with states, spend a lot of time thinking about how to support you all in using this information, such as through presentations like this, to promote equitable work-based learning, planning, and implementation. And what I have here is an example of a guide. We produce a lot of guides and materials that help you to dive in and learn a little bit more. The website is at the bottom of the screen, so if you want to learn a little bit more about our work, and there's a few other guides that explain a little more details about the GIS map. And of course, we'll share these slides with you as well. But I think one of the first big points I want to make is that GIS is about much more than maps. Maps are the resource and a tool, to be sure, but they alone can't sort of do what we're hoping for. To us, it's about the fact that the maps help us understand the complex environments and then can really be a catalyst to bring people together so that folks can be empowered to use data to plan smarter and ultimately make a difference where it's needed the most in the right places. So let's talk specifically about how this applies to CTE work and work in education. I think it's probably safe to assume that most of you in the room come to work today, every day, for a similar reason, to improve educational opportunity for children on some degree, right? We're all kind of trying to help increase opportunity for young people. However, it's important to highlight how our understanding of educational opportunity has changed over the last 50 years. As you may remember, or may not, from graduate school, Coleman was a researcher who first introduced the concept of educational opportunity in the late 60s. In his model, simply put, children attend school and children with school together lead to academic and life outcomes. Based in this model, simply improving schools can alter the trajectory of a student's life. However, as we all know, decades of school improvement policies and programs have done little to disrupt racial and economic segregation and generational poverty. This model hasn't been proven to be true. And ultimately, we know schools are not enough. Schools alone are not enough. But it wasn't until the early 2000s that educational practitioners and researchers began to reconceptualize our approach to understanding and intervening on educational opportunity. In his presidential address at the 2008 AERA conference, William Tate urged the educational community to study and act upon the geography of educational opportunity. In short, this perspective recognizes that students not only attend schools, but live in neighborhoods and go to churches and play in parks and build relationships with peers and adults, and that all of these things together produce academic and life outcomes. And we know this to be true. We know there's a myriad of influences on young people every day. So over the last decade now, research in education and urban studies has reinforced this idea of the importance of neighborhoods on long-term life outcomes. So today, we also know that the geography of education extends to the virtual realm as well. And we need to consider broadband access, data plans, digital literacy as well in our efforts to improve access and opportunity. Access to information has become a critical component for access to opportunity. Now I know all of this can seem a bit overwhelming. Honestly, state education agencies weren't really built to improve entire ecosystems. However, we argue that there are a number of accessible and practical adjustments that SEAs and localities can make in order to more accurately and effectively address the geography of educational opportunity. In short, this work is largely about considering how can we be more precise in how we understand and address the landscape of inequity in education and employment. What can we do differently to change this opportunity equation? And of course, we think there's a number of things that can be done. First, we need new ways of visualizing data in order to see the entire system. We need to know what factors influence life outside of the school building. Second, rather than going alone, we need to convene other agencies and community partners to support the work, right? We need to do this in collaboration. And third, we can involve and empower local leaders and community members to help analyze their current situation and design customized solutions, as in all of you, to provide you with the right information that helps you to make the right choices, right changes on the ground. Today, we're going to focus on seeing that whole ecosystem through geographic information systems. So let's talk a little bit about GIS and how it works, a little bit of GIS 101. Simply put, Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, allows us to take multiple layers of data from multiple sources and to visualize that data on a map. Thus, it can help us to see how the geography of educational opportunity looks different for different children in different communities. GIS utilizes a number of geographic shapes to help us represent details on the map. And so here I have represented 3 of the main things we use. We have points that are unique locations with a distinct X and Y value. These are specific addresses, things like schools, businesses, the typical things you Google on a map, on your Google Maps or MapQuest, any address. Then we have lines that are a pair of points, right? The thing that connect between 2 points. And these are often the naturally occurring lines that happen on maps, like roads and rivers and railroads. And then lastly, one of the most important thing in GIS is the polygon. Polygon is an enclosed feature whose shape and location represent different types of data. It can be thought of as an area. The sort of traditional polygons are school districts, neighborhoods, counties, feeder patterns, and this will become really important as we see how it plays out, looking at different data sources based on the area, the polygon shapes. So let's see what it looks like on a map. Here we have a blank map of Ohio. If we add the points, this is what it would look like on the GIS map. So this is an example of where schools are located, and we can see more schools are located in the city areas like Columbus and Cleveland. Then, if separately we were to add the lines, here we have lines such as the interstate highways. Again, the typical thing you're used to seeing on the map. And then finally, the polygon. In this case, I believe it's school districts, that we can break it down and see the different parts of the state that allows us to represent the data with this different information. And that particularly comes through different options of visualization. As we start to look at data broken down by different points and different polygons, we use a slew of symbology to understand the data, such as different shapes, colors, shades of color on a scale, depth, dimension, and the like. And we'll have a legend and everything to show you how that breaks down on the map. So let's talk about an example. Let's imagine that we take Pennsylvania school accountability data and have symbolized the school points based on their performance in 2017-18. Red dots are working through some challenges. Yellow schools are strong in some areas and struggling in others, and green schools are doing well on whatever the state measures. The big point here is that school performance data alone tells us only a small piece of the story. And yet that's often the only piece of data we have as our main information source to make decisions. But looking at the squares on the left, let's say we bring in some economic data, health data, labor workforce data, some other social factor data, such as percentage of single mothers with school-age children living in poverty. Using GIS, we can take those layers and begin to understand how these various factors come together for different communities. And here we can see that it gives a lot more context. That's why the red schools are struggling, that there's other things going on with those schools, a number of other things going on, and that perhaps the yellow schools only have one challenge happening. And it makes a lot more sense why the green are doing well. And importantly, this information gives us the information to understand which schools need the support of multiple agencies in order to improve that geography of educational opportunity. Let's look at another example. So in a real life example from Dallas, Texas, we have a snapshot of how the data in the spreadsheet has been translated into the map. We can see that the low performing schools, the red dots again, are densely concentrated in the south of the city. This is also where we see the highest concentrations of poverty and minority families, which is represented by the gray shaded polygons. So again, we see there's this correlation that we know to be true between low performing schools and things like poverty. It's important to note that these data just come from simple spreadsheets that many of you are likely already using, but it gives you a new way to see the information and understand how it connects together. So here's another example from Ohio. On the left, shapes that are red are high concentrations of CTE programs. So polygon shapes regions that have high CTE opportunity. On the right, we have locations of employers. Red, again, being high concentrations of employers, and blue being where there's low, it's cold spots as employers. Immediately, you can see there's a mismatch of where CTE programs are and where employers are, particularly if you look at Columbus, where there's that red spot of CTE programs, and under the name Columbus, which you might not be able to see, there's actually a blue cold spot. So this is a huge area of opportunity, and if it continues as is, it's going to be an area of pretty major frustration for students graduating out of CTE programs. So how do we begin to actually use the system? There's a lot of, as you digest and you understand the information, then you want to start to break down how you'll analyze it. And there's a lot of levels to the analysis that is really a process of sort of zooming in and zooming out to add context, adding layers, taking layers away. And so you might start at the state level and see a general trend, and then zoom in on one target area as you notice something that catches your eye. Or if you're a local level stakeholder, maybe you start within your community and then zoom out to see how trends compare across the county or the state. So that sort of zooming in and comparing happens incrementally, and it'll take some time to play with it. So let's see how that sort of works in like a storyboarding fashion. It's a little bit like an onion, peeling back the layers. So here, if we think about starting at the state level, that we might start with an index called the Social Vulnerability Index that helps us understand where there's high inequality. And we zoom in, we see that overall, when we look at the state, we can see the areas that have the greatest need. And then we want to maybe think about other areas, other contexts that might align with that. In this particular area, we thought about, what about literacy? And then by zooming in, we actually notice that there's a correlation between high levels of vulnerability and low levels of literacy that helps to explain what's going on and offers an area that we could target to address that inequality. Conversely, if you're at the individual community level, maybe you start with specific locations. You have locations of high schools and you have locations of businesses. Perhaps by adding a layer around the number of employees to see where there's actually demand. So then by diving in, understanding what programs are offered at these schools and making sure schools have relationships with the businesses, you can ensure that there's high school internships and things that can get the kids interested and keep them in the community. So let's now talk about Pennsylvania's geography of opportunity, specifically looking at your map. So this project started with some conversations in the fall with your state CTE team, and we've met over a series of months with a group of that team, a number of folks, again, different stakeholders coming together to think about what this should look like and thinking about what data sources should be included. So here I have on the screen a few of the data sources that we're looking at, things from statewide or nationwide, like the census. The living wage calculator comes from MIT and is an important indicator, a more reasonable understanding than the poverty threshold about what it takes to live for different ages, number of people, populations. In different areas, of course, based on regional costs. Then we have a number of state level data that we got from different departments to understand, different dimensions of education and workforce. The image on the left is a document that we'll be sharing with you that has much more detail about all the data sources and the methods and helps you see what data we have included in the map. So be on the lookout for that next week. We'll share the slides from this presentation as well as the actual link for the application and this document that helps you understand the data sources. So you'll be ready to use all of this information. And so then here I have the link, but I know you're not going to be able to write down all of those characters. So I'm just going to jump over to the map itself so that you can see what we're working with, and we'll get you the link later. So when you click into that link, this is what you'll see. You'll see a gray screen with the state of Pennsylvania. Here we already have the lines of the counties that are represented, so it looks more similar to what you would look on at Google Maps. In the left-hand corner, we have the same components of a zoom and a zoom in and a zoom out, getting back to your default. You could type in a specific address if you wanted. And then most of the information that we're looking at is in the upper right corner along this bar. So if I click on borders, I can see that counties is what is currently selected. And I can turn it on or off as the key lines that are already, or the shapes that are already there. These are polygons, my mistake. If we add the freeways, then those are the lines that help us look across the state. One other important one to point out to you is we have the workforce development areas, and you can click on those polygon shapes to understand what the various there's components of information that it gives you based on when you click in them. And we're hoping to add a little more information on the pop-up. So that's good for you to keep an eye out. The maps right now have a lot of information in them, but that's not to say it might not still grow and evolve over time. So keep an eye out as, of course, we think of new data that might be included. One important thing to note as you're working through the map is it retains whatever you have clicked on. So if I leave workforce development areas clicked, as I work my way through the map, that will, these sort of pinkish polygon shapes will stay. And sometimes the data points will start to conflict with each other, as you'll see. So in this case, I'm going to turn counties back on so I get like a rough frame of what the state looks like and leave that as the border that I work through. So the next layer that we have that we could add are public transportation stops. Here we have the dots that pop up generally in the cities. One important thing is it might take a little bit of time for it to load. Even when you're first clicking into the map, sometimes I've noticed it's like just a gray screen and I don't know what's happening. It's just a loading problem. Give it a couple minutes and it'll fully get there. The more data we put in it, the longer it takes. So if I turn that off, we're on public transportation. The next set of information is education. So we have our colleges, our two-year colleges specifically, and our CTC programs. And I'll talk more about those in a moment. One important note is you see there's different colors under colleges. So this little arrow, if I click on that, shows me what the different meanings are. And so we have our legend of what information is currently selected. Taking that off. Now we get into, we have career and technical student organizations and where things like the FAA are located across the state. This is a different shape. So if we had, schools up at the same time as these student organizations, we could see them separately. Then we have businesses. So these are broken down by major categories of businesses to understand, so let's say construction. Where are there lots of construction companies? So by this, if I click the little down arrow, I can see this represents the number, these are individual businesses and the number of employees that each business has. So if I click on that one big bubble, I see it gives me, again, more information on the pop-up, on their sales volume, and that they have about 200 employees. So that's why they're the sort of middle-sized bubble. And so all of them are the same color in this, so you really wouldn't be able to do multiple businesses at the same time, kind of would need to work your way through the different industries. Going now, we have number of businesses overall in an industry. So taking that same example of construction, this scale tells us how many overall businesses there are in a particular county. So looking at where construction stands out in the right parts of the state, as well as some around Pittsburgh and Luzerne County, we can see the number of the areas that construction is an in-demand industry, as well as obviously all of the others. Going down, then we have wages. We have wages by industry, similarly, that give us a range of colors that stick out. You can see where the yellow is the highest and the lighter purple is the lowest of job wages in this area. Here's also where that living wage is on folks that like the level of living wage that's expected, and it's lower in other parts of the state based on cost of living. Next, going on, we have new hires. So here, if we take healthcare as a different industry we want to look at around number of new hires, yellow is the most, and so the areas that have the most new hires are primarily in the healthcare industry in the eastern side of the lower eastern side of the state, but there are a few on the left as well. So it just, again, gives you a different view of the in-demand industries. Then we also have a layer for demographics. So we have it around age, like the number of the population that tends to be the highest, and you can kind of go through each age bracket, as well as gender and racial, ethnic categories as well. And then finally, our last category is social factors. So here we have a host of, there's a lot of information on this one, and I encourage you to spend some time diving in and understanding what's here. We have that social vulnerability index, we have the unemployment rate, housing insecurity, there's a host of factors around health, such as hospitals, primary physicians, substance abuse deaths, and then general things like income inequality, as well, scrolling down, as the number that lives below the poverty line. So again, you click on it, we see there's a range of our factors that help us to see what it means. So now I wanna walk you through a story. I was playing around, I was trying to see like what stands out to me in this information. Obviously, I can start here, I can see the poverty, below the poverty line information. I think social vulnerability index is a nice one to start with. I kind of wanted to think about places that were close to cities that would give me, counties that are near opportunity because they're near cities, but really we're seeing some inequity. And so what stood out to me was this county here, Luzerne County, that was near Scranton, recalling actually that also under the poverty line, that also was a large percent living below the poverty line, and not quite as high as Scranton, so the county that actually has Scranton. So if I zoom in a little bit, and that we have that social vulnerability. Oh, there's an example of I can't have them on at the same time, or the colors conflict with each other. So that's a good demonstration of what not to do. So here again, so looking at this, this stands out to me, and I want to dive in and understand a little more. So I'll turn that off, and now I want to look at like some occupational area to see like what's going on in this area. So if I go to actually new hires, I asked around and I heard manufacturing is a major area within, looks like our freeways were turned back on. That I knew that new hires, that manufacturing is one of the big industries. So let's just look at manufacturing just to see what's going on. And so it confirms that manufacturing is in fact a big industry in this area, the same equally between Luzerne and Lackawanna counties. So yeah, there's something there. There's a lot of possible jobs. It's the highest bucket, the highest industry, or not the highest among all of them, but among manufacturing, there's a lot of jobs potentially, or at least a lot of new hiring going on. So if I want to do okay, I'll leave that on just for comparison's sake for right now and dive a little bit more into this. Looking at our businesses, I want to know specific, how many businesses are there? So I'm talking about manufacturing. And if I add that, so remember these are individual companies and they give us the size of the companies, we see there's a lot actually along this corridor. So that's why we have the freeway corridor there. So we can see that aligns with what's going on with where the businesses are located. And again, if I click on it, I can find out that that's what this one's about, and the number of employees and the specific area of what they're manufacturing. So this seems really interesting. I wonder what education opportunities exist for all of these businesses that are located here. So if I go back up to the apple around education, and since we're talking about CTE programs, I want to know where the CTCs are. And here we see there's a few along the corridor. Interestingly, there's only one up in the Lackawanna County, but since I'm really focused on Luzerne County right now, I think it's interesting that there's two. There's a lot of jobs. There seems to be a lot of opportunity. So I would want to look and start a conversation now with these two CTC centers to understand what exactly are the options for programs within the centers, and are they aligned? Do they know all of these businesses? Do they have relationships with them? Are they making sure that here we have this big one, asphalt paving, that there's a relationship and the right kind of skills for manufacturing? And especially since there's this inequality thing going on, I wonder about if folks are getting trained to be line workers or in the manufacturing, or are they getting higher level skills to move up and work their way into management kind of roles within the manufacturing companies? So I want to know a whole bunch. It gave me a whole host of new questions that I can ask people. And then just for another source of information, to add colleges as well, the two-year colleges, and we see there's actually only one in this area. And it's a little bit farther from anything else. There's not as much of manufacturing businesses nearby. So I would want to know what are, again, the programs at this community college. And if they are in manufacturing, it creates a new set of conversations that I want to have with businesses. We have all these businesses that have all these small locations along this corridor. I wonder if they can stretch a little bit farther south, farther west, and create some opportunity in these areas where there's gaps. So with this information, I can start thinking about conversations with businesses, and I can think about conversations with schools and how to bridge and get the two talking to each other if they're not already. Now, I know this is just one small example and really just the beginning of the conversation, but I think armed with this kind of data, it helps us to drill down, look for patterns, and see opportunity. We want to make sure that when there's growth, that we maintain that growth. And then, of course, we want to address the gaps and build new opportunity and address the areas of inequity and inequality actually creates a lot of opportunity to disrupt poverty. And by having this information, we have the chance to do that. But we know that to do that effectively requires relationships. So, and how we help broker those relationships between the right people to make it happen. This tool is just one resource to help you start that conversation. So I think with that, I will open it up if anyone has questions. And I'll zoom it back out so you can see more of the state. And you'll see how it takes a second to load. And again, we'll share the information with all of you after so you can play with it. I think it just takes some time to go through it and digest your community, but I'm available for questions as they come up. Does it go into zip code data? So we really have it more broken down at the county level than specific zip codes and specific communities. I think that you can see that when you zoom a little bit, at least with where the businesses and the specific address points are, but it's not broken to that level in terms of, you know, these polygon shapes by zip code. We have it at the county level. Of course. But I also think as you're using these platforms, and we'll be transitioning the application to your CTE team, and you're finding things that you wish were in the map, I think that can always be a conversation to think about further advancements to the application over time. Gender and race, good question. Okay, let me go ahead. Oh, and actually one other thing to show you before I do that is all the way to the right is the legend. So this shows me what I have currently clicked, and then I have manufacturing and counties and colleges. So when I want to go look at gender and race, I will need to go back and unclick those areas so that the data doesn't conflict with each other. Turn off our businesses and our new hires. And then if we go to demographics, so we have percent male is one of the demographic information. So you can see where there's generally a more equal distribution of male to female in that like purple, lighter middle shade purple, and the brighter colors have more males than females, and the lighter have more females than males. In terms of race, it looks like what's in here is Hispanic and African American. So we do have that at least for those two racial categories, racial ethnic categories. And then separately African American. So you can't have them up at the same time because they're the same color, so it would conflict with each other, but it helps you to see where there is the larger African American population and separately where there's the larger Hispanic. For some reason, that must have been the only groups that were available with a larger percentage. I'm not sure why those were the only two included. Okay, no more questions. I have here just for you to have it if you want to jot down my contact information as questions come up when you start using the map. You're welcome to reach out to me with any questions, and we'll look forward to hearing how it goes and you're able to use this for your needs assessments. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.